So my talk, my name is Kees van Bochove. I'm CTO of the Hyve, which is a small company in the Netherlands here. We focus on commercial support for open source tools. So I'm so glad to be here with so many people working all on an open source project. That is just fantastic. I think actually today we have a chance to write history. Let's have a look at how Transmart and in general how IT in pharma for the research works. Take for example Janssen or Centocor, J&J, it doesn't really matter. We want to have some scientists supported by IT systems. So Janssen buys some service internally by the IT department, and let's say they start creating an application with micro data analysis support. Maybe they have some developers of their own, or they hire a company, like for example Recombinant by Deloitte, to build this. Then they want some more. They want to load public microdata from Geo. By the way, this is a fiction story, but it has some relation to it, to reality. Then, well, you know what? We also want to be able to store and retrieve the analysis we did in the past so that we can see right results and we don't have to reanalyze again every time. And by the way, we also want to be able to view our studies and search on gene names, disease names. We want genomic variation support in there. We want to be able to load VCF files. We want to be able to load TCGA data. We want to be able to load perhaps some genomes data. I haven't heard it a lot yet, but probably a wish also. So that's how you come to an application like Transmart after spending a lot of money and resources. Say we have Sanofi. Say that Sanofi does the same, right? So you want all the stuff in there, you crunch up your IT, and then we have our Sanofi application. Now Pfizer does the same. Only they're a little bit smarter. They go to Oracle, pay a lot of money to Oracle. Oracle has a product for this, actually a great product, Translational Research Center. I'm just pointing this out because Oracle is in the audience. GlaxoSmithKline does the same. Maybe to go to IDBS, also a great product, also because IDBS in the audience. No, seriously, I think these are both examples for how Transmart could be and actually are higher quality products right now. But that's not the point of my talk. My point is, we do all this separately. We use a boatload of money to accomplish the same things. So yes, there's business, that's good, but what's wrong with the picture is that all these companies here, their core business is not creating IT. It's making drugs. So they're spending a lot of money on IT development, and maybe that wasn't a problem in the past, but certainly now, with all the budget cuts on R&D, this is something to look out for, right? So there has to be a better way. There has to be some way of pre-competitive sharing, of pre-competitive working together. Well, you know what? Janssen actually made Transmart open source. So it's for free. It's a no-brainer. All the companies, all the pharmaceutical companies are now going to install Transmart. In fact, that's sort of what's happening right now. It's great, right? It's just for free. Now we can actually spend our money on research. But wait a minute. How do I install this thing? Who do I call for support? How do I get my own data and how do I get my own instance? How can I make sure that this thing is running 24/7? Well, that's a problem. That's actually why we have projects like Etrix. That's why you have companies like Recombinant, like Thomson Reuters, like the Hyve that can do supportive open source tools. Now let's have a look at how scientists in academia do. They love to collaborate, right? So they know how to make open source work, surely. Well, case in point, microdata analysis. This was a summary published in 2003, and it was actually comparing several open source products for microdata analysis. There are some advantages, disadvantages. All have their own quirks. None of them is best at all things. So good, there's some variation, there's the freedom to choose. But when you look in 2013, people are still publishing open source microdata analysis tool. Yet another new, fancy web interface. So what you see here, I'm just seriously, at some point there's no added value in this anymore. If you look at these publications, a lot of work is repeated over and over again. Why? I don't know. Just because scientists want to write new things. If you reuse something else, you can not really publish it. So you get a not invented here syndrome. This picture is from Rob Hooft. He is the CTO of the Netherlands Bioinformatics Center. And one of the goals of NBIC, which is the short name for that, was to support open source software and support scientific solutions in the Netherlands. And he worked with a lot of bioinformatics groups in the Netherlands, from Groningen, from Amsterdam, from Rotterdam, to see whether they could work together and share their work, and whether some of the open source starters that were created could be professionalized into good products. Well, guess what? Rob in the end found out, and he probably in some frustrated moment put this picture on his blog. What do scientists do when they create software? You start here with a problem definition. This is what I want to do. Then you search the libraries and you search the other websites. Maybe the solution is already out there. Do I find a solution like what I'm needing? No, then I write it myself. Do I find something that does what I want? Well, I'll just write it myself anyway. This is how it works. And seriously, this is why NBIC had a lot of trouble getting some of the applications that they perfected also going on and being used by everybody. So no, scientists aren't really that much better at sharing. Let's have a look at all these great European-funded projects. That's like, for example, Open Talks or Open Facts. You have eTricks, which is not on here, but basically eTricks is working on Transmart. No, you don't have open repository on Git. That's why I'm not here. So my point here is, this is just an example of some of the projects that have software sitting out there on GitHub. SH Bionetworks from the States, a lot of great stuff in there. Do we use it? Do we look at it? Well, I don't know how many people in the audience here did. But I'm afraid it's still up to you and me to piece all this together, to really start reusing solutions that are already out there and make them better instead of starting anew. I'll tell something about my personal background also. This is an open source project I worked on for a couple of years. It's written in Rails. It uses R. It has several types of own state which you can load in. There's great GUIs for that. You can even specify your study design. It has R Groovy and PHP APIs. Anything sound familiar here? This is basically like Transmart, only it was done with some other institutions. And after the funding ended, well, there are still some parties using it, but it's sort of drying up right now. So I'm telling you this also as a personal story, and because it coincides, I think, with Transmart interest. You'll see in a moment where I'm getting at. But I want to tell you at this point that this sort of frustration that you can probably feel from across the room is why I started my company, the Hyve. I thought, it should be possible somehow to use this open source type of software and to actually start sharing, to reuse existing solutions instead of constantly creating things anew. And you see that's also a trend generally in society right now. And at the same time, you have to specialize. So our specialization is software engineering. That's what we do. That's what we're good at. We do some data management as well, and that's it. So, yeah, sorry for the commercial break here, but I just wanted to tell you this is how and why I created the Hyve, and why I'm so glad to be here and so actively trying to get Transmart through. Because writing with software is a hard process, people. It's iterating and iterating and iterating. You don't get a user interface right the first time. You have to go back to your clients, you have to rewrite it. More and more new feature requests will come in. This is not something that's just, you do it overnight, just for writing a paper. This is something we should together work on. And then we have a chance to address the issues, because in the end it's not so similar, it's not so different what we're doing. We're all basically doing the same things in different institutions behind walls. And here's our chance, Transmart, today, to make a difference, to write history. So let me back up a minute. Transmart has good potential. Scientists have trouble reusing each other's work. And we can do better. Well, I might have been a little bit too negative about scientists and open source. Because I think we also should have a look at some of the success stories. There are a lot of them. What about this one? R, bioconductor. Who doesn't love R? Who doesn't work with R? I bet many of you, if you are in bioinformatics, someday have worked with R and with bioconductor. Looking at bioconductor, oh, by the way, the website of R, great website, right? You see here the font, Times New Roman, I think, with blue. Same as in 85, I like it. Great guys, these are guys. It's old school, yeah, absolutely. So probably physicist and astronomist, and those kind of guys. If you look at bioconductor, the website of bioconductor is actually a little bit nicer because they're biologists. But seriously, let's have a look at the community effort here in our bioconductor. This is over the years how you see how many messages per day there are in the mailing group of bioconductor. That's a lot, right? We don't have this in Transmart. 20 messages every day. Well, maybe 20 HIP chats. That we can do. But these are like, there's a new version of this module out, or there is a bug fixed, or we need something in here. So how is this community of R governed? I tried to find out from the internet, from the interwebs, whether I could find out how this worked. I also spoke to someone who attended an R open source meeting. Basically, it's a small group of people that are still working on R, making it better. They have lots of ideas how to make R really better, to get greater performance, but they don't have a lot of money. And still, you see that this software is used all over the world. So we don't need a lot of governance. We just need some people that go start working on it and commit to it. That's, I think, one message we can take from this. Another example is Galaxy. I love this project. I was at the Galaxy community meeting, I think it was 2 years ago. There were more than 150 people just coming to this Galaxy community meeting. So there's some people working on it. In fact, I'm not sure, this would be an interesting time to put a statement out to see if someone can correct me, but I think that Galaxy is the largest open source project in bioinformatics, at least in terms of number of users. Why? Well, because they constantly work on the project. They stick with it. Like I said, creating good software is hard work. It's not something you do overnight. And with these Galaxy people, they've been working steadily, starting with NGS support and then taking advantage of all the great things that are already there, such as in our bioconductor and lots of other open source packages, just putting it in one UI. This is a good example of a successful project. But this is not the only thing. There's something else. They have a toolshed, Galaxy. There's, I think, more than, what, 2,700 tools in there. So you can put your own tools. Great. We saw that with bioconductor too. You can create your own packages. Yet another example is Plone. This is not bioinformatics, of course. This is much more general, thereby much more used. These people have more power. I was at a Plone community meeting some time ago. Those people, they have a very good commercial model. You can make your own Plone plugins. They can be proprietary, commercial. You can charge for it, or you can make it open source. But the point is, there is a Plone collective, and it's modular. You can plug in your own things, and this is still going strong. Drupal, and I think Jinlei pointed this out earlier in meetings in Amsterdam, in London. Drupal is the same. Lots of modules which you can work on. So it's a community. We don't all use the same product. We have a stable core, and then we have our own customization plugged in. Okay, I probably made my point already 3 times. These success stories, what they have in common? They're not making one big project, one silver bullet that does it all. They build a community, they have a stable core, and they have good options for modularization. So I think as Transmart we should learn from that, right? We need a marketplace, and we need that modular setup. And it's something we are going to achieve in this workshop. Are you with me? Okay, I'll just go a little bit more into details on the architecture and also something else. To date, from the day that Transmart was released as open source, and even I think sometime before that, there have been a number of contributions from the community. Obviously, Janssen was going to Transmart out. You have Millennium, they did some great stuff like creating an R interface which you can use to load Transmart data directly into R. Sanofi, you will hear more about this today. They did some great things in Transmart. They have some nice customization, which I think we all want to have in there. Pfizer did some work also on the GWAS studies, VCF files, loading and storage, some enhanced data export capabilities. But well, we have all these branches, but they're not connected. So all this great stuff is out there, and you'll see this tomorrow in the presentations, but we have not been able to merge them. We will do that, of course, and it's also one of the points of the workshop, and there will be a working group on that from tomorrow. But why? Why is this such a mess? I think, again, this comes back to that we have this one monolithic code base, and we don't have a small core on which we can build. So that really explains why it's so hard to merge all these branches, because there are changes all over the place in the application, and then you have to do this hard work of merging everything. Yeah, I was discussing this with Jinlei earlier. We really need that core getting up. We were discussing it in London, and then we agreed to have, several parties agreed to have some people working on the core and committing to that. And I'm just focusing on the things that I know, which is refactoring of I2B2 that we did in the CTMM trade project, mostly done by Gustavo, who's sitting here in front. My colleague at the Hyve. I2B2 was integrated, and you heard that Brian also said some things about this. I think he said basically the same. It was integrated, but not in a good way. Because the abstractions, the APIs of I2B2, they were leaked. In fact, Transmart went directly to the I2B2 database for lots of things. There were some good reasons for that. You'll hear more about this in a talk from Dan on Wednesday, how and why this all happened, right? Yeah. So there's reason for that, to do with performance and so on. But still, it's not a very nice position to be in, because when you look at security, and Florian from Imperial College did some tests there, the security was horrible. There was client-side authorization in the web browser, so there's basically no authorization. We had an older version of I2B2 which was not updated, which was specially packaged, and it was just glad to have it running. Of course, that's not how we want to integrate with such major other open source projects. So basically the work we did is we took the functionalities of I2B2 and rewrote all the functionality that we needed for Transmart again as a Grails plugin. This means that we don't need the I2B2 binaries anymore. However, in the API, we still try to stick as close as possible to the I2B2 APIs. This means that it's now possible, because we're, at least for the part that we refactored, we go through these APIs. So you can now either plug in this core DB, which we created as a temporary solution, or you can plug in I2B2 itself. And it should still have the same semantics. So that's the great thing about modularization. That's where we need to get to. This was done already half April. Remember that the London meeting was in February, end of February. Look, people, if you work hard and you are committed to what you're doing, you can actually achieve that. I2B2 not needed anymore. I think this is great, great first step. But we're not done yet. Wednesday, we will have an API hackathon with the developers. And then we're going to work on all the aspects of the API, just starting to design the API, starting some working groups. How do we think the API should look like? So to summarize this, I believe that if we do this, if we form this working group Wednesday, this is probably a more important delivery of this workshop than the whole 1.5. Oh, no. I don't want to shovel it into the table. It's still very important. I know, Terry, and I'm all for it, and we're helping you as much as we can. But still, in the long run, this will matter. If we cannot get this right, Transmart community will die. I can guarantee you. There's no question about it. I've seen this happen so many times now with open source projects. We really need to get to that core. Okay, just a few more minutes to give you a glimpse of how we're going to approach this API thing, now with some real architecture schemas. And remember, this will be followed up next Wednesday. This is the Transmart architecture as it is now. So let's see what we have. On the data loading side, we have Pentile, ETL. You can also plug in your own ETL tools, of course, if you have developed those. Such as the tool that was developed by Eugène, which we will talk about tomorrow. But basically, this is data loading, and these are the various database schemas. I'm not sure if you can read it in the back, but we have clinical data here. We have DApp, which is high-dimensional data. We have Biomart, which is the search and metadata, for example, for arrays. And then there's Search App, which contains the data for the search application. So this is data storage. Then there is Solar, which does some indexing on Search App to speed up retrieval in the user interface. And you have the file system, which is, for example, used to store the results of an R execution when you're viewing this in your browser. Now here in the middle, we have the logic tier. This is where the real work happens. I2B2 data controller, I think it is, service. There's a component here that does a lot of plumbing, tying together the high-dimensional data and the clinical data. And we have some other stuff which is less important. Then our modules, as you can see, the setup of Transmart right now is basically that you run R on the same server. Or you could run it on a different server, but it would scale only to one RServe instance. I'm just skipping over this. Where would we like to go? I think this is where we should go, or something like this. You see this big bar here in the middle is the Transmart Core API. If we define a Transmart speak, right, a very lean core with just the API specifications, and which we all agree on, because there has to be a core with what you all agree on. That's also what you can learn from these other open source projects. Then we can have implementations of all these various APIs, and you can plug and play those like whenever and however you like. For example, I made some alterations here. You could store biomar data in MongoDB. You could use Galaxy for executing our analysis instead of going directly with R. You could use HBase here. As Shikai will talk Wednesday about this project, which she did with using a new HBase for storing high-dimensional data. You could plug and play whatever clinical system you have, even if it is your own clinical data warehouse, which is strictly behind the firewall, as long as you commit to this API. I think if we can achieve this, then we're in a very good position to build a living and thriving community. Thank you. So, any questions or remarks?
Referring to the previous speakers, they were talking about the philosophy from the Linux notebook. Could you then, in principle, say that a Transmart core API should be seen as the Linux kernel?
I think that could be a good analogy. Yeah. Yeah, Jay?
Kees, I think technically, look, I agree with everything you're saying here. An extensible environment to make it easy for people to add functionality. I'd like to think everyone agrees that this is the right move technically. But I think it's really important for, especially that we have foundation members who are both listening in, Niki is here. I think trait and etrix are really, really interesting because what is indicative of it is that Europe understands how to make investments into this type of technology and how to share it. I'm not convinced the U.S. is, because there are incentives for investigators to do things on their own, certainly in the U.S. And it's not only just creating a technical infrastructure to support extensibility may not in and of itself incentivize investigators to not do things on their own. And I think what's really important, and I think that's one of the issues with CAD, right? It wasn't just that it was top down. One of the issues is they recreated things that were already in the commercial environment, right? They recreated it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I think what I'd really like to see Christoph and Brian and Gil going to the White House is to try to get the U.S. scientific establishment to understand that these types of infrastructure, these types of systems are where we should be going, and that we can still find ways of incentivizing investigators to contribute, participate, and gain value out of this if we do indeed build the technical infrastructure to make it work. And that's why I'd like to see especially the foundation, because I think the foundation is really critical here for getting that message across, and we have representation here, and I'd like to see them bring that message forward. And I think especially in the U.S., because I think Europe kind of gets it. I don't think the U.S. does.
Occasionally, you even have a prism block in their dialogue. If you can have a small prism block, it would be dialogue.
So, I 100% agree with you, Keith. Okay? That we must build out modular API so that we can have a good approach. I'm not, in the next thing I'm going to say, going to disagree at all. But I'll add, it's half the picture. The other half of the picture is, while we're building that API, we absolutely have to make sure that the users are getting the capabilities they're looking for. Because if it ends up being a kernel that doesn't lead to the actual use cases being achieved, we'll end up losing for a different reason, in terms of losing faith in the user community. We'll just sort of migrate away. And so one of the things that I2B2 as a project did very well, and I think Trait's doing it well, and Etrix is doing it well, and it seems to get a little bit lost in the dialogue about the API, is to make sure there's driving projects that are real, that are end user driven scientific projects while we're doing the API, you said force the API to be useful for those projects, not simply focus on the modularization.
That's a very good addition, Dan. Thank you for that. And essentially, with the approach we took here, because let me be clear, this is already completed, right? And it's completed in the current version of Transmart. So we're not changing any user functionality. We're only doing plumbing in the back end. Now, I'm not sure that we can do all of the plumbing we need to do in that fashion, that we do it transparent to the user. But ideally, we should be able to do that.
I would say when we're selling it to the user, we'll need to tell the user. The reason why we're doing this plumbing is to make the whole system better. But by the way, your kitchen is going to work better. And you will have a better sink when you're done. If we just say, come back to us, your kitchen's going to be exactly the same, but I fixed all the plumbing on the inside, we'll say, no thanks.
Yeah. But to be clear, trade has a lot of users waiting, anxious to get to the systems that we're building. So we are very much a user-driven project. We're actually discussing this morning the very topic that you bring up now. How can we make sure that the plumbing that we do does not drive us away from the users? So it's a very good point that we need to keep that in mind during this workshop. Anything else? Other questions, remarks?
I think what's missing there is the API for the plugins and what kind of different plugins we're going to support. All these plugins are basically just different backend implementations. Right? So are we going to discuss that? Or is it in the roadmap?
Yeah, so there was one, I think this is a clear thing that Eugène has been pushing for a long time. Is, guys, we need to make clear what is the specification when I write a plugin. And there are other parties interested in that as well. So yes, I think, and that was also had some email conversation about it. Tomorrow we'll have one group focusing on that in the hackathon.
So actually, maybe after hackathon, we have a sort of a sustainable process.
Yeah,
and keep going this one.
Of course, we don't want to just come
hackathon.
here and then
Exactly.
do something and then later. This should be the start of forming working groups. That's the whole goal of this workshop.
Absolutely.
I assume that's why you've all come here. I mean, just to enjoy them. You better watch a movie. Okay.